This series is one of the most thrilling shows in recent years, and will make audiences realize that Japanese dramas can be as fast-paced as any other. The story begins on the bustling streets of Shibuya, Tokyo. At a crowded intersection, three teenagers are playing around carelessly, completely oblivious to the traffic light changing. They run recklessly across the street, causing a car accident, and immediately hide in a subway station bathroom stall out of fear. Suddenly, in broad daylight, fireworks explode in the sky. Then, something strange happens. A loud knocking comes from outside the stall, and the lights suddenly go out, as if there's a power outage. What's even weirder is that all three of their phones lose power at the same time. An eerie silence envelopes them. The three men cautiously stepped out of the toilet cubicle and saw that the intersection, which had just been full of people, was now empty, and the entire city was engulfed in deathly silence. All electronic devices have failed, and they can't contact anyone. Stunned, the three are left in confusion, as if they're the only people left in the world. But soon, the main character, Arisu, who spends his days escaping reality through video games, grows excited. If the world is now just the three of them, it might not be so bad. They could finally break free from society's torment.
食べ放題、飲み放題?
Both were excited, but Daikichi Karube was not happy at all. Unlike his friends, who are eager to run from reality, he still holds hope for life. At that moment, a screen suddenly lights up. On it, the message reads, "Welcome players, the game is about to begin." Following an arrow displayed on the screen, they see a red glow in the distance, coming from a building labeled Game Arena. They follow the instructions to an elevator, unaware that they've triggered a hidden infrared sensor underfoot. On the platform beside the elevator, there were several phones. Following the instructions, each of them picked up a phone. To their surprise, the moment they held it, the phones automatically recognized the trio's faces. These phones, too, had no signal and only contained a few basic apps. At this time, the phone made a sound. Registration is open for 2 minutes, and so far, 3 people have participated. Before they could figure out what was going on, a woman named Saori Shibuki appeared behind them. Shibuki walked straight through the infrared net and took out the name tag in Chota Sagawa's arms. Shibuki explained that once someone enters the infrared grid, there's no way out. The only way to leave is to forcefully clear the game. A schoolgirl also wandered in, looking confused, and unknowingly joined the game. The game was called Life or Death. Players had to choose the correct door within the allotted time, and only by escaping the building would they clear the game. The difficulty level was 3 of clubs. The group took the elevator upstairs and arrived at the game room. Their phones displayed a message. The room was timed for 2 minutes, and they needed to choose the correct door out of 2. The angel door had the word life written on it, while the grim reaper door had death. Chota, thinking it was just a TV prank, found it amusing and pulled out his phone to start recording. Arisu asked Shibuki what would happen if they chose the wrong door. Shibuki avoided eye contact, didn't answer, and just kept urging them to open the life door quickly. At that moment, thick black smoke began to fill the room. Unable to handle the smoke, the schoolgirl rushed towards the life door. After the schoolgirl died, Shibuki immediately opened the death door. The remaining 3 quickly followed her lead. Before they had time to process what happened, the countdown for the second room had already begun. But with 10 seconds less than the previous room, Arisa realized that Shibuki was deliberately standing still, letting others make mistakes for her. Seeing this, Shibuki revealed that the key to the game wasn't which door to choose, but rather who should open the door, the one who would die. She further claimed that her life was worth more than Arisa's group, so they should be the ones to open the door first. With time running out, Arisu, in a fit of frustration, decided to open the door himself. However, the condition was that Shibuki would have to open the next door. Arisu stood before the death door, trying to muster the courage. Despite his determined demeanor, he couldn't bring himself to push the door open. Karube, willing to risk his life, stepped in to try instead. Fortunately, he guessed correctly, and they all escaped into the next room just in time. The timer now displayed 1 minute and 40 seconds. It seemed that with every room they passed, the time decreased by 10 seconds. Karube roughly pulled Shibuki forward. By the rules, it was now her turn to open the door, but Shibuki was paralyzed with fear. Karube, unwilling to force a woman into danger, realized that since this was a game, there had to be a way to figure it out logically. Knowing that Arisu was a renowned gamer, Karube asked him to look for patterns in the game. However, Arisu was too nervous to think and ended up arguing with Karub, unexpectedly.
もう無理だ。
It was this punch that woke Arisu up. He recalled that when the three of them entered the building, there was a BMW 523 parked at the entrance. After a short period of thinking, he had an answer in his mind, and then walked straight towards the dead door. Everyone was stunned by this bold move, and Arisu began explaining his reasoning. A BMW 523 is 94 meters long, and the building was about the length of 4 cars, meaning it was 20 meters long. The escape route map showed that the building was a square, and each room was about 6 meters long, which meant there could only be 3 rooms across each side, making the floor plan resemble a grid of 9 rooms. They had entered from the bottom left room, and the schoolgirl had died in the life door on the right. Therefore, the death door on the left must be the correct one. Next, Karub guessed right in the second room as well. By now, the pattern was clear. They just needed to follow the perimeter of the grid to reach the exit. Arisu's deductions were correct. They successfully cleared 2 more rooms, but when they reached the last room, he was dumbfounded. Where the exit should have been, there was a solid wall. Only doors remained to the left and right. The death door on the left led outside the building, and the life door on the right was the room where the schoolgirl had died earlier. Now, both options seemed like death. Arisu racked his brain, trying to figure out what he had missed. Suddenly, he remembered that Chota had recorded a video in the first room. From the video, they noticed that the room where the schoolgirl had died had no door on its wall. Yet here, a door had appeared. This meant that the room wasn't a perfect square and had been sectioned off, leaving some hidden space. Thus, the life door had to be the correct answer. At the last second, they escaped, though Chota was a bit too slow, and his leg was burned. In the final room, there were only 10 seconds left. According to Arisu's reasoning, the death door was the right choice, but the life door had a glowing emergency exit sign hanging on it. Luckily, Arisu didn't fall for the trap, and they successfully escaped. Finally out of the building, the group was relieved to have narrowly escaped with their lives. Just then, their phones signaled the end of the game, awarding each of them a 3-day visa, and a 3 of clubs card lay on a nearby table. While they were still trying to comprehend what had just happened, a middle-aged man walked into the alley. The man told them that this game had no end and that his visa was about to expire today. Arisu was horrified by what he heard. At the same time, the building's lights shut off, and the entire city once again fell into darkness. Shibuki explained to the group that the visa was their survival time. Once it expired, they would be killed by a laser. If you want to survive, you must keep playing the game. After you pass a level, the number on the difficulty card represents the number of days you can get a visa. The 3 of them thought the game was over, but they didn't realize that it was just beginning. The next day, the streets of Tokyo were still eerily silent. Arisu tried to start a car, but nothing happened. Even stranger, the food inside the car had already spoiled, and it seemed like the owner had been gone for much longer than just yesterday. The group temporarily settled in a shopping mall. After eating, Arisu shared his thoughts. Shibuki had arrived 3 days before Arisu and the others, and had already participated in a game before meeting them. This suggested that each player was experiencing the disappearance of people at different times, although it was unclear how this was orchestrated. The fact that someone was dealing the cards meant that there had to be a game master behind it all. Meanwhile, Chota's burn was worsening, and he muttered that a god must have created this world. That night, Karub and Arisu discussed their next steps. They needed to participate in another game soon to quickly adapt to this world. Only then would they have a chance to survive and help the injured Chota make it through. Arisu, too, was growing increasingly curious about the creators of this deadly game. The next day, Arisu and Karub arrived at a new game venue, a deadly arena set inside a remodeled apartment complex. At this point, the phone will start to prompt that the difficulty of this game is Spade 5. He explained that the different suits represent different types of games, and the larger the number on the card, the more difficult the game. Spades represent physical strength, diamonds represent intelligence, clubs represent teamwork, and the most sinister of all is hearts, which represents playing with people's emotions and betraying partners. This game was hide and seek. The players had 20 minutes to find the base of the Oni without being caught. If they failed, the entire apartment would explode. As the game began, Shuntaro Chishiya quickly climbed to a vantage point to observe the movements of both the players and the Meanwhile, the others scattered across various floors. Arisu and Karub began searching each room for the base. Just as they were about to head upstairs, there appeared a masked killer wielding a submachine gun. One player was quickly shot dead, sending the others into a panic. Trying to escape the game would only result in death. While Arisu and Karub continued their search on the third floor, they had pursued two sisters on the second floor. Arisu soon realized that the mask limited its vision to only what was directly in front of him. He shouted the killer's location to the others, suggesting they work together in relays to pinpoint his position and evade him while searching for the base. But no one responded except Yuzuha Usagi. With only 8 minutes left on the clock, there were just 7 survivors remaining. At this point, Aguni Morizono decided to take action. He pointed out that it was also human. Instead of waiting for death, they could try to hunt him down. Aguni instructed Arisu to continue searching for the base while he and his underlings lured the killer into a trap. Karub was to attack once they had to reload. Following the plan, Karub launched an attack on it. As Karub distracted the killer, Aguni moved in for the kill, but it was a formidable opponent. Quickly overpowering Aguni, Karub pulled out a small fruit knife and repeatedly stabbed it, but to his surprise, the killer, though disarmed, drew a massive 40-meter machete. The three of them became locked in a brutal struggle, neither side able to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, Arisu found a clue. Earlier, that it had fired at someone from a distance, aiming specifically at a certain door. It seemed that the killer was particularly focused on this room. Arisu deduced that this room was the base they were looking for. Shuntaro, who had been quietly observing the situation, came to the same conclusion and prepared to open the door, but Arisu suddenly realized something: they had only needed to stay inside the room to protect the base. So why was he out hunting the players? However, with only 3 minutes left on the clock, there was no time to ponder this further. Arisu and Shuntaro cautiously entered the room, and it indeed turned out to be the base. However, they did not expect that there were actually 2 ghosts. Shuntaro used a radio to temporarily stun one of the killers with an electric shock. Just as they began to relax, the second had ambushed them. Shuntaro managed to escape the room, while Arisu took cover in an inner room. Inside, Arisu found 2 buttons. Both had to be pressed simultaneously by 2 people in order to complete the game. Desperate, Arisu shouted out the window for help. Usagi, hearing his cries, immediately rushed to his aid. The game was successfully completed, and the horse-faced man woke up. Under the mask was unexpectedly a kind-looking older woman. Even the ghosts were players forced to participate in the game. Meanwhile, the horse-headed man on Karub's side was blown to pieces. Karub found a walkie-talkie on the body of his fallen companion, and from it came a strange, eerie voice.
Beach.
Just as Karub was about to ask Aguni what was going on, Aguni had already vanished. On the other side, Shuntaro found a piece of paper with strange symbols on the ghost's body. Meanwhile, Shibuki, who had stayed at the base, took advantage of Chota's mental state, which was on the verge of collapse, to brainwash him. Arisa comes from a wealthy family and has high intelligence. Karub is handsome and strong, but Chota has no notable qualities. The other 2 only hang out with him to feel superior. Now that Chota is injured, they likely won't take a crippled man through the game. So the 2 of them should cooperate. It was clear that Chota was shaken by these words. Shibuki, on the other hand, would stop at nothing to ensure Chota would sacrifice himself for her when the time came. The next day, Karub decided to check out the beach mentioned on the walkie-talkie, hoping it might lead to some answers. However, Chota and Shibuki's visas were set to expire the following day, meaning they had to participate in another game today. The game venue was a botanical garden. As soon as they entered, they saw a table full of various weapons, along with a few pairs of goggles. Following the instructions, the 4 of them put on the goggles. The screens displayed their avatars, and the goggles also recognized the appearance of others. allowing them to communicate remotely. While they were still puzzled, their phones displayed the difficulty level of the game 7 of Hearts. Arisa remembered someone had told him that the Hearts games are all about manipulating people and betraying your allies. Sure enough, this game was brutal. The rules were like a game of tag, where one person is the wolf, and the others are sheep. The sheep had to hide and avoid being caught by the wolf for 15 minutes. If time ran out, the collars on the sheep's necks would explode. Only the wolf could win, meaning only one of the 4 could survive. The game began, and the first wolf card was assigned to Chota. On the verge of breaking down, Chota frantically tried to remove his collar, but Arisa quickly stopped him. Forcibly removing the collar might cause it to explode instantly. Desperate, Chota glanced at Arisu, and the wolf card immediately transferred to Arisu. It turned out that the wolf and sheep's roles would swap as long as they made eye contact. Shibuki quickly realized that in this game, the real goal wasn't to hide from the sheep but to avoid the wolf to survive. She screamed to get the others' attention, and as all 3 looked at her, the wolf card transferred to Shibuki. Shibuki dashed into the woods. Karub was the first to react, grabbing a machete and giving chase. Arisu tried to calm Shibuki down, suggesting they could work together to beat the game, but Shibuki wasn't listening. In her panic, she tripped over a tree root, and by then, Karub had caught up. The 2 former companions were now at each other's throats. With Karub swinging his machete in anger, his blade got stuck in the tree trunk. Shibuki quickly picked up a stone and knocked Karub to the ground. But she accidentally made eye contact with him, transferring the wolf card to Karub. The tables turned instantly, and now Shibuki was the one chasing Karub. Shibuki knew that Karub had a wound on his abdomen, a wound she had helped bandage, so she kept striking the same spot relentlessly. Arisa still believed there was a way to beat the game. He shouted Karub's name, transferring the wolf card to himself, then turned and ran. Seeing this, Shibuki grabbed the machete and began chasing Arisu. While the injured Chota could do nothing but pray to God in desperation, Arisu weaved through the forest but was soon surrounded by Shibuki and Karub. Shibuki's survival instinct was strong. She believed Arisu was trying to be the sole survivor. In her eyes, Arisu was just a useless slacker. Rather than letting him survive, she thought it was better to claim the chance for herself. With that, she lunged at Arisu with the knife. At the last moment, Chota still couldn't betray his friends, and Karub shakily followed after them. But because of his injury, Karub couldn't run very fast. Arisa ran to a spot near some glass and pulled out the tools he had prepared earlier, using the glass reflection to try to remove the collar. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. Just as he was about to use the pliers to snap the collar, the memory of Ghost being shot in the head the night before flashed through his mind. And in that instant, his courage deserted him. Through the headset, Karub's angry voice came through, cursing Arisu, accusing him of not truly wanting to crack the game but only trying to survive on his own. Arisu could only cry and mutter apologies, unsure if he was apologizing for his helplessness or if he had actually entertained the thought of surviving alone. He recalled a memory of his father praising his younger brother when he was accepted into college. While mocking him, calling him useless, he had no passion for life, no sense of responsibility toward his friends. Perhaps in this game, the one most deserving of death was his aimless, apathetic self. Karub's shouting pulled him back to reality. There were only 5 minutes left. Karub, overwhelmed by his injuries, collapsed, and the engagement ring he had planned to give his girlfriend fell out of his pocket. Unlike Arisu, who lacked direction in life, Karub genuinely wanted to start a family. As he stared at the ring, he remembered his girlfriend saying that he always talked about Arisu and Chota, showing just how much his 2 friends meant to him. Chota, meanwhile, was still desperately holding Shibuki down. Though he didn't want to die either, he wished even more for his friends to survive. Arisu fell back into his memories. Every time he faced his father's scorn or his brother's disdain, 2 familiar faces always appeared outside the yard, chasing away the clouds hanging over his heart. The 3 of them were the best of friends. Together, they would sneak out late at night, celebrate in the streets of Tokyo, and dream about their futures at bars. As long as the 3 were together, they had no fear of the storms ahead, no fear of the future. Thinking about this, Arisa realized that what he valued most in this world were his 2 friends. If they both died, what would be the point of his survival? Arisu finally stood up, determined to transfer the wolf card to one of his friends. But it wasn't just Arisu who had decided not to survive alone. After reflecting on the past, Chota tightly covered Shibuki's mouth. hiding deep in the woods, and Karub deliberately avoided Arisu's search. No matter how loudly Arisu called out their names, neither Karub nor Chota made a sound. Just like the game's rules, the sheep were hiding, doing their best not to be found by the wolf. Time was running out, and Shibuki had stopped struggling, resigning herself to her fate as she tightly embraced Chota in despair. In a soft voice, Chota whispered, "I'm sorry, Shibuki. I've been too selfish." Meanwhile, Arisu was still desperately searching for his two friends, shouting their names with all his might. At the very last moment, Karub finally appeared. He turned his face to the side, avoiding eye contact so Arisu couldn't transfer the wolf card to him. In the end, his friends truly gave their lives, sacrificing their chance at survival for the one they cherished the most. Arisu collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed with despair, helplessness, sorrow, and pain. All of his emotions erupted into an unstoppable scream that lasted until his voice gave out completely, leaving him hoarse and unable to utter a single sound. 2 days later, Yuzuha arrived at the park to collect a rabbit that had fallen into one of her traps. On her way back, she saw a familiar figure, Arisu, lying on the road, peacefully waiting for his visa to expire and accepting death.
imitate.
Yuzuha respected his decision, in stark contrast to Arisu, who had completely given up. Yuzuha chose to live differently. Every day, she cooked, exercised, and read, trying to make the most of her life. Before coming to this world, she and her father had conquered countless peaks together, until one day, his father's supposed feat of climbing Mount Everest without any aid was suspected to be a hoax. Unbothered by the rumors, her father packed his gear and set off once more on the journey, but to her surprise, that was the last time she ever saw him. He disappeared without a trace. Yuzuha fell into a deep depression, but after entering this world, she realized that since everyone was destined to die, she might as well live as fully as possible before it happened. As for Arisu, he lay on the road for days, refusing to move, and it seemed like he would starve to death even before his visa expired. Yuzuha, moved by compassion, took him back to where she lived. Under Yuzuha's careful care, Arisu gradually regained his strength. At this point, Arisu still couldn't come to terms with his friend's death. Yuzuha shared her own experiences and then said, "You can go back and lie on the road waiting to die, but nothing will change in this world. Your dead friends won't come back to life, and they gave up their chance to live for you. Are you really going to just waste away?" This woke him up from his despair, though he still couldn't accept his friend's death. He knew his friend wouldn't want to see him give up on life. Yuzuha decided to take him to the game that night. Since Arisu had helped her during the last apartment game, she wanted to help him clear this one. The starting point of the game was an old bus. After Arisu and Yuzuha boarded, they found that 3 other players were already inside, and none of them seemed to be beginners. Yuzuha noticed that one of them had an injured leg. When he realized she'd spotted it, he became instantly wary. After all, no one knew yet if this game was cooperative or competitive. At this point, the phone will start to prompt the game type as the 4 of clubs, where clubs represent teamwork and 4 represents the difficulty of the game. The rules were simple: survive the challenges within the time limit and reach the finish line to win. The game time was 2 hours, and at the bottom of the phone screen, a 0 appeared. The group guessed this indicated distance. At this point, Takuma was in bad shape, barely able to stand, let alone run. One of his companions tried to start the bus, but although the engine turned over, it had no fuel. Seeing this, Takuma told the others to go ahead without him, assuring them he'd find a way to catch up. After an emotional farewell, the 4 finally set off. Since they had no idea how far the finish line was, they could only keep running. The numbers on their phones slowly ticked upwards, suggesting they had to reach a specific distance. But in that case, it's not like a team-based game of plum blossoms at all. It's more like a game of spades based on physical strength. In no time, they had already run 5 kilometers. Along the way, they encountered a supply station, but although the group was parched, no one dared to drink the water provided. Yuzuha pulled out a thermos she had prepared and shared her water with Arisu. Arisu was soft-hearted, and after finishing the water, he passed it to someone else. After quenching their thirst, the group continued onward. As they reached a dark stretch of road filled with parked cars, Yuzuha noticed something up ahead. The group weaved through the packed vehicles, dodging a beast that was chasing them. One of the teammates fell behind. He sacrificed his life to give the others a chance to escape. Though heavy-hearted, the remaining three had no choice but to keep going. Along the way, Arisu spotted a motorcycle. He remembered Chota once saying that electronics not controlled by the system still worked in this world. This meant that some old diesel motorcycles and cars could still be started. Both the motorcycle here and the bus at the starting point were diesel-powered. Although the motorcycle's battery was dead, its tank still had fuel. If he could bring the fuel back to the bus, they could save Takuma. With an hour remaining, Arisu told Yuzuha and the others to keep going while he pushed the motorcycle back to save Takuma. As he passed through a dark tunnel, he saw that the beast and the man had perished together. Takuma was hiding in a car, waiting for death. When he saw Arisu pushing the motorcycle to rescue him, he was overwhelmed with gratitude. Meanwhile, Yuzuha and the other player reached the end of the road. Perhaps the finish line was near. However, with only 5 minutes left, they heard strange noises from behind them.
Misu?
The two of them sprinted frantically. Yuzuha still had some strength left, but the other player was completely spent. After a fall, he took one last look at his wife's photo of his wife before being consumed by the flood. The water surged faster and faster, and Yuzuha was about to give in when Arisu arrived in the bus to save her. After the flood receded, the three of them woke up inside the overturned bus. Fortunately, they were all unharmed, but when they climbed out of the wreckage, they were shocked to see the word finish written on the bus. It turned out they had been at the finish line from the very start. The numbers on their phones indicated the distance to the finish, meaning they had run for nothing, and 2 lives had been lost in vain. Takuma thanked Arisu, and after exchanging heartfelt goodbyes, they parted ways. Arisu then told Yuzuha about the beach. He wanted to fulfill his friend's dying wish and go there to find answers about the game. Despite their efforts to gather information, they couldn't uncover anything about the beach. So, they changed tactics and began observing others. By observing other players, found that many of them came in teams, wearing the same type of bracelet on their arms. And basically all the players who cleared the game also wore the bracelet. For these players, clearing the games didn't seem particularly difficult. What happened next shocked Arisu even more. These players had functioning cars. Determined to uncover this group's destination, Arisu and Yuzuha chased after them, running at full speed.
あれなの?
あれだ。
Their persistence paid off. They eventually tracked down the beach. In stark contrast to the lifeless city, the beach was brightly lit, as if nothing had ever happened. However, their attempt to covertly investigate the beach didn't go unnoticed. The people at the beach had already detected their presence. When Arisu and Yuzuha opened their eyes again, they found themselves inside the beach. The people around them were well organized and disciplined. At this time, a man with long hair and sunglasses walked in. His name was Takaru Danma. Danma explained to the two that there was only one way to leave this world, by collecting all the playing cards. According to Danma, it wasn't that the world had changed. Rather, they had been selected and brought into the borderlands.
全絵柄を集めれば元の世界が戻ってくるってこと？
世界が戻るんじゃない。選ばれた一人が元の世界に帰れるんだ。
Once a complete deck of cards was collected, one person could be sent back to the real world, but every game was extremely treacherous, and it was nearly impossible for a single person to clear them alone. So, Danma had created the beach, establishing a utopian community. Here, there was no division between people. Everyone worked together to collect the cards. Each time a full set of cards was completed, one person would be sent back to the original world. The order of who would be sent back was determined by their ranking within the beach's hierarchy. The rankings fluctuate based on each player's contribution to the beach. And naturally, the current leader is Danma. They generate electricity using fuel-powered generators, rely on rainwater as their water source, and constantly scavenge for weapons. Therefore, the seaside is considered the strongest organization in Borderland. There are 3 rules at the beach. First, everyone must wear swimsuits, preventing the concealment of weapons. Second, all playing cards collected during games belong to the community. Third, those judged guilty face the death penalty. Danma tells Arisu and his companion that they can stay and work, but if they refuse, They'll be locked up and executed when their visa expires. It turns out that the 7 of hearts that Arisa won in the wolf and sheep game happens to be one of the few cards the beach has yet to collect. Danma is pleased and doesn't make things too difficult for them. During the day, the beach's members party and have fun. And at night, they drink, dance, and gather to participate in the death games when the time comes. Shuntaro from the previous game was also a member of the seaside. Seeing Arisu arrive at the beach seems to have sparked some idea in Shuntaro. Once again, it's a night of death games, and with their sheer numbers and military might, the beach players easily dominate certain games. Among them, Aguni is the strongest fighter. Aguni's crew includes 2 dangerous men, Takatora Samura, skilled with knives, and the unhinged Sugiru Niragi. Yuzuha and Arisu are assigned to different games, and Rizuna joins Arisu in his game, testing whether he has what it takes to rise to leadership. Also joining them is Kuina, who's usually seen with Shuntaro. The game is a test of intellect, 4 of clubs. The rules are simple. There are 3 switches, labeled A, D, and C, but only one will light up the room's bulb, while the door is closed. You can flip the switches as many times as you want, but since the door is closed, you still won't know which one is correct. When the door opens, you only get one chance to flip a switch. If someone stays in the room to observe or if any switch is already flipped, the door will lock and cannot be opened. There is only one chance to answer, and water is continuously flooding the room. Above, there are exposed electrical circuits. Once time runs out and the water reaches the circuits, everyone will die. Just turn on switch A when the room is closed. Wait a moment, then open the door and turn on switch B. If B doesn't light up, you can touch the bulb. If the bulb is warm, switch A is correct. If it isn't, then it has to be switch C. After successfully completing the game, Arisa returns to the beach to find Yuzuha, and fortunately, she also survived her game. Hikari Kuina, noticing how close the two are, suggests they should get together. Since in such a brutal world, it's better to enjoy life while you can. Suddenly, Aguni arrives with a group of people. Aguni leads the militant faction, the only group at the beach allowed to carry weapons. The only counterbalance to their power is Danma's idealist faction. This balance of power between the two groups is what keeps the beach functioning. Most of the militant faction are ruthless killers, so it's best not to provoke them. However, tonight, Aguni's target is Arisu. Aguni expresses regret over Karub's death, disappointed that it's Arisu who survived instead. When Aguni sees Yuzuha's beauty, he gets some wicked ideas and orders his men to take her away. Arisu immediately stands up to stop them, and at that moment, Danma appears.
お前のボスは誰だ? Aguni.
Danma's arrival saves Arisu and he invites him to join an internal meeting. After tonight's fierce battles, the beach managed to collect several new cards. Assuming there are no face cards in the game, the only card the beach is missing is the most difficult one, the 10 of Hearts. However, the 10 of Hearts game has yet to appear. Rizuna speculates that there might be some kind of trigger condition. Danma's visa is about to expire, and he must participate in the next game. Hearing this, the members of the militant faction exchanged glances. The next day, Arisu wandered around trying to gather more information about the Limbo world. All he learned was that the beach had already sent people to explore areas outside of Tokyo, but beyond the city was a sealed-off jungle. Some people had tried to escape by boat but met a horrible death. It seems that collecting the playing cards might truly be their only hope. During his investigation, Arisu stumbled upon a large, foul-smelling dumpster filled with corpses traitors executed by the militant faction.
それが楽園の本当の姿。ビーチのルール。裏切り者には死を。
Seeing that Arisu had witnessed the brutal side of the beach, Shuntaro asked him what his next move was. Arisu's thoughts were simple: find out the truth of this world, avenge Karub and Shota, and ensure Yuzuha returns to the real world. Shuntaro admired Arisu's noble goals, but pointed out that with their current abilities, waiting for the day they could return home was nothing but a pipe dream. He then explained the current situation to Arisu. Although the beach appears stable, Danma can no longer control the militant faction, and it's only a matter of time before he's overthrown. When that happens, chaos will erupt. Shuntaro revealed his plan to steal all the playing cards and escape the beach before things fell apart. He invited Arisu and Yuzuha to join his scheme. Since neither of them had any desire to serve the beach, they immediately agreed. The next day, all of the beach's leaders held an emergency meeting. Danma had died during a game, and his body bore gunshot wounds. To prevent panic, the leaders decided to keep the news under wraps. According to the rules, after Danma's death, the second-ranked man should take over, but under pressure from the militant faction, led by Takatora and Naragi, the leaders were forced to raise their hands in a vote. Making Aguni the new leader, Danma had placed all the playing cards in a safe in the leader's suite. During the inauguration ceremony, the new leader would receive an envelope containing the safe's combination. After confirming the code, it would be resealed. Only the next leader could open the code. Shortly after, the leaders announced the leadership transition to the public. Shuntaro then instructed Arisu to use this opportunity to steal the cards. Arisu snuck into the leader's suite while Yuzuha kept watch outside. After finding the safe, Shuntaro informed Arisu that the code was 8022. Although Shuntaro hadn't seen the code, he deduced from Aguni's expression that the envelope must have contained a blank sheet of paper. In reality, the password was the mirrored word boss.
かなずいぶん堂々と入り込んじゃってまあ
Just as Arisu entered the code, he was caught red-handed. Seeing Shuntaro standing behind him, Arisu finally realized that the true fool had been himself all along. Arisu was taken to a room where all his senses were sealed off with tape, preventing him from seeing or hearing anything. Naragi planned to leave him there, awaiting his death by laser once his visa expired, completely unable to perceive the outside world. Meanwhile, Shuntaro stealthily made his way back into the leader's suite. It turned out Arisu had been nothing more than a pawn. Shuntaro knew that such an important poker deck could not be placed in such a conspicuous safe. After Arisu's capture, Shuntaro noticed that Aguni kept staring at a wall painting. Just like how a mother instinctively looks toward her child in danger, Shuntaro deduced that the envelope didn't contain a blank sheet, but rather a hidden clue, a map. The real safe was concealed behind the painting. Shuntaro removed the painting, revealing a safe hidden behind it, and the code was indeed 8022. Shuntaro retrieved all the cards, except for the 10 of hearts. At that moment, the beach's power system suddenly malfunctioned but quickly returned to normal. Having stolen the cards, Shuntaro met up with Kuina in the courtyard. Kuina criticized Shuntaro for exploiting the naive Arisu. The two debated whether they should betray Arisu, and the argument escalated. Just as Kuina, disillusioned, was about to leave, Shuntaro sensed something was wrong. The entire beach had suddenly transformed into a game arena. A voice broadcast over the loudspeakers announced that, as a token of appreciation for the resident support, the hotel had arranged a special game for everyone. The game difficulty was revealed to be none other than the elusive 10 of hearts, the hardest of the heart games, which test human nature. In the hotel lobby, a young girl lay dead with a knife in her chest, and the true culprit was hidden among the crowd. Players had 2 hours to identify the murderer and cast them into the fires of justice. If they failed, everyone would die when time ran out. The dead girl's best friend was immediately the first suspect, as the two were always inseparable. Yet today they weren't together. Naragi, without hesitation, tried to throw her into the fire. They went up to stop them and proposed to find the murderer based on alibis. At that moment, someone noticed bloodstains on Rizuna's handkerchief. Rizuna quickly explained that the blood belonged to Danma, and she suspected Danma had been killed by the militant faction because the bullet she extracted from his body matched the type they used. Just then, Aguni appeared and bluntly demanded that the murderer confess, or the militant faction would massacre everyone. As Naragi fired his gun into the air, chaos broke out, with people frantically fleeing for their lives. Even some members of the militant faction expressed doubts about the situation. Under Aguni and Naragi's leadership, the beach descended into a living hell. To make the slaughter easier, Takatora set fire to the hotel. People, desperate to escape the flames, would rush into the courtyard, where Naragi, perched on the rooftop, began his deadly battle royale, killing everyone from above. This way, the militant faction wouldn't even have to bother with moving bodies. Many players were smoked out and slaughtered halfway through the game. Meanwhile, Yuzuha and her friends searched desperately for Arisu's whereabouts. When Yuzuha and her friends searched one of the rooms, they found a member of the militant faction hiding in the bathtub, too scared to kill. From him, they learned that Arisu was locked up on the 4th floor. Meanwhile, Niragi continued his killing spree. The reason for his madness traced back to his past life. He had been a student subjected to relentless bullying. Ironically, in this world, he had become the most brutal bully, but the arrogant him met Shuntaro tonight.
このライフルだと至近距離じゃ当たんねえって思ってんのか。
あ
なんだよそれ。
Kuina noticed someone sneaking around suspiciously on the security cameras. She went to the office and discovered it was Rizuna rummaging through the drawers. It turned out Rizuna was trying to use solidified gel to extract fingerprints from the murder weapon. However, as the two walked out the door, they were blocked by Takatora. Kuina stepped forward to confront him, while Rizuna quickly returned to the lobby to collect the fingerprints. Though Kuina seemed like a frail woman, she held her own in a fierce battle against Takatora, who wielded a massive 50-meter blade. This piqued Takatora's curiosity about her past profession. It turns out that Kuina comes from a family of karate experts and is a man. When her father discovered Kuina using makeup, he flew into a rage and cast her out of the family. Kuina left home and disappeared without a trace. Years later, she reunited with her ailing mother, but by then, Kuina had undergone surgery and was now living as a woman. To her surprise, her mother didn't blame her but instead remarked that Kuina's new appearance suited her much better. As for Takatora, he was once a frustrated, unsuccessful writer. After arriving in this world, for the first time, he felt truly alive. In an effort to sever ties with his past, he shaved his head and covered himself with bizarre tattoos, vowing never to return to his old life. While Takatora completely rejected his past, Kuina courageously faced hers. The outcome of their fight was clear without needing to be said. Meanwhile, Arisu, who had been locked in a dark room, struggled to the ground. Desperately, he rubbed his face against the floor, finally breaking free from the tape that bound his mouth. Yuzuha heard Arisu's cries for help and followed the sound to a locked door, only to be ambushed by members of the militant group. Yuzuha scaled the walls, entered the room through a window, and successfully rescued Arisu. At this point, only 30 minutes remained in the game. Yuzuha believed that if the killer wanted to avoid being caught by the other players, they would have to blend in with the hunters and continue killing. In other words, the murderer could be one of the militants. But Arisu didn't agree. He reasoned that if things continued this way, the militant group would eventually turn on each other. This game was not simply about killing everyone off. The Hearts games were designed to manipulate people's minds. At this thought, Arisu had an epiphany. He shouldn't approach the problem from the perspective of the killer but rather think like the game's organizers. With Danma and the girls' deaths, the beach quickly became the stage for the game. This game had been planned by someone who knew the beach well and had designed it for this very moment. Meanwhile, Rizuna's fingerprint analysis was complete. However, just as she was about to share her findings with everyone, she was attacked by the militants and knocked unconscious. By now, Arisu had already deduced the true identity of the killer. At this point, the remaining players at the beach had all been surrounded by the militants. Just as Aguni ordered the massacre to begin, Arisu arrived in time to stop the bloodshed. Having been locked up before the game started, Arisu had a solid alibi, so Aguni had no reason to kill him. Arisu suggested they work together to find the real killer, but Aguni knocked him to the ground instead.
ビーチの中で唯一アリバイの確かなアリスを襲う。それはあんたが魔女だからよ。
This immediately cast suspicion on Aguni. Surprisingly, Aguni didn't deny it and openly admitted everything. The militants all raised their guns, but none dared to fire. At this moment, Arisu stopped them and revealed his deduction. Aguni wasn't the killer, and Arisu had already seen through his actions.
あんたの目を見てやっと分かって。あの日の俺と同じ。ダチを殺すためだ。
It turned out that Aguni and Danma weren't enemies but longtime friends. After arriving in the borderlands, Danma, believing this world was too hopeless, decided to create a utopia at the beach. he deceived everyone into believing that collecting all the playing cards would allow them to return to the real world. To maintain Danma's position of power, Aguni had no choice but to play the role of a ruthless antagonist, keeping dangerous individuals like Niragi and Takatora in check. This explained why, despite the militants' strength, they never overthrew the idealists, and the two factions maintained a delicate balance. It was all part of Aguni and Danma's plan. Gradually, however, the power corrupted Danma, leading him to kill players who secretly hoarded playing cards. Establishing the third rule, traitors would be executed without mercy. On the night Danma joined the game, Aguni suggested dissolving the beach, as he could no longer control the militant faction. But to Danma, this sounded like betrayal. He had become intoxicated with power. Aguni, on the other hand, saw clearly that power sustained by lies was meaningless. Danma, however, refused to listen and aimed his gun at Aguni. To Aguni's surprise, Danma's gun had no bullets. Aguni killed his best friend with his own hands, but he blamed the beach players for Danma's madness, believing it was their existence that drove him insane. This was why Aguni wanted to wipe them all out. The game designer had exploited Aguni's state of mind to tailor this game for the beach. Just as Arisu had said, Aguni's goal wasn't to win the game but to kill everyone. So, who was the real killer? Arisu had found the answer. The Hearts games are designed to toy with players' minds and mock them. In the 7 of Hearts game that Arisu previously played, everyone wanted to live, but the game forced them to die. This game, crafted around Aguni's psyche, followed the same twisted logic. Since Aguni wanted everyone to die, the game might just go the opposite way. The condition to clear the game was to throw the killer of the girl into the fire. If there was a way for all players to survive and still clear the game, then only one person could meet that condition. Everyone had likely suspected it from the start. The true culprit was the dead girl herself. As long as they threw her body into the fire, the game would be cleared. Yet Aguni still clung to his idea of everyone dying together, going mad and obstructing the players from clearing the game. At that moment, the girl's best friend suddenly offered to distract Aguni, giving Arisu and Yuzuha a chance to carry the body to the fire. Everyone was stunned by this turn of events. Meanwhile, Rizuna regained consciousness. She had analyzed the fingerprints on the knife and discovered they were reversed, meaning the knife had been held by the girl herself and plunged into her own chest. This matched Arisu's deduction, as everyone stood in shock. The fire had already begun to engulf the lobby. Then, unexpectedly, Niragi, who wasn't dead after all, stormed in with a submachine gun, throwing the hall back into chaos. Several players were killed in the gunfire. Arisu and Yuzuha went up to stop, but they were no match for even one severe burn patient. In the end, Aguni carried Niragi into the sea. Disappearing with him, the players finally had the chance to throw the body into the fire. At that moment, Arisa noticed something on his second phone lying next to the best friend's body, with one still recording video. As the girl's body, the witch, was consumed by the flames, the 10 of Hearts game finally came to an end. Everyone had paid a heavy price, but they earned a 10-day visa extension. The once carefree utopia of the beach was now nothing but a sea of flames. Shuntaro, however, did not rush to leave. He returned to the hall to retrieve the 10 of Hearts card. With this, Shuntaro had collected every card except for the face cards. Afterward, Arisu and Yuzuha examined the phone left by the best friend. It revealed that both the girl and her friend were employees of the game's organizers. They had helped design the games and infiltrated them to sow chaos. Even though they were dealers, they still needed to play the games to renew their visas. If they ever revealed their true identities to the players, they would be executed on the spot. Through the video footage, Arisu and Yuzuha discovered the location of the game's operation base. Hidden inside a Tokyo subway station, the base housed thousands of screens where the operators watched players die in the games, celebrating each death as a testament to their game's success. Following the clues from the video, Arisu and Yuzuha found the operations base, but when they arrived, it was pitch dark, and all the operators were already dead. It appeared that the operators were also players. Since the players had cleared the 10 of Hearts game, the operators had become the losers and were executed by lasers. Just then, a voice echoed it with Shuntaro and Kuina, who had also found the base.
Do
Do you remember the blueprint Shuntaro found on the ghost's body in episode 3? It was actually a map of the Tokyo subway system. Shuntaro had thought finding this place would reveal all the secrets, but it turned out that even this base was just a puppet of higher powers. Suddenly, all the screens lit up. A familiar figure appeared on the monitors. It was Mira, the beach's executive leader. It turned out that Mira was the mastermind behind the games all along. She first congratulated them on clearing the game, then began replaying the most thrilling moments from the games on the screens. But that wasn't all. Mira had prepared a surprise for them.
戻れるんか。新たなゲーム。新たなゲーム。
ネクストステージは明日正午から開催。みんなで一緒に楽しみましょう。
また戦うんだね。
Countless fireworks lit up the dead city, and several airships appeared over Tokyo, hanging a huge banner with a human head logo, announcing that the game had entered its second phase.